in the game, we really ain't playing. We regroup up in the Slack chat where the coaches debrief. We be piecing these puzzles, occupy the chunk of the pie. Ain't no lie when we hit the block, helmet's casket is top. You be seeing helmet after helmet, helmet after helmet. First place, second place, fifth place, eighth place, 12th place, 15, 16, 20. So many helmets, you got blurred vision, we got too many. Check your check. Oh man, shit. They got us fucked up. Army, regroup. We pledge always to have that edge. We don't fire warning shots. Competition just drop. We locked and loaded before lock. Whatever the time, yeah. Do you even correlate?
Being the best requires a willingness to outwork your competition. There's always someone smarter, faster, sharper, more naturally gifted to come around.
What is up? This is FantasyFling with the FS Army for another weekend review, Millie Maker review, and a little bit of a mass multi-entry strategy. And it was a crazy lineup that won the Millie Maker. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, so the lineup that took it down, this is over on dfsarmy.com. This is live. I write this each and every week, so check it out. We got so many articles on the site, so definitely make sure you are reading these because they are very beneficial. A lot of tidbits in these, but this lineup, in fact, let's kind of start with Fantasy Labs, and we're just going to look at some of the constructions, the key ingredients to the lineup. The guy that took it down was a single bullet. And, often people say you need to mass multi-enter this contest to win it. Well, you don't. We see it quite often. You'll have someone with a single bullet or with 5 lineups takes this down. So that's exactly what happened this week. Now, what was crazy about this week, sometimes I feel it's just better to be lucky than good, because this lineup was one that did not have a QB stack. And, some people might say, well, it's cost prohibitive and this and that. That's why we're not doing a stack. Come on. Brock Purdy's $5,800. You could have stacked both with him and Kittle and Ayuk, and it actually would have outscored this lineup by 8 points. This lineup scored 250 points, so it was a really low-scoring week, and that's why this lineup was still able to make it to the top of the leaderboards. Now, one thing about that, though, is it wasn't optimal. Like, there was a chalk smash this week, and I think the optimal lineup was like 250-something plus points. But nonetheless, this lineup was basically kind of a variation off your cash lineup. So, this is pretty much what I played in cash. Brock Purdy, Brian Robinson, Devin Singletary, Tank Dell. It was just a couple differences. I played Tyreek Hill. I played Dallas Cowboys D. This is kind of your cash lineup, right? You could have played Dalton Kincaid in cash. The biggest difference, I think, really is just one pivot, Khalil Shakir and versus Rondale Moore, and then DJ Moore, which he was cash viable as well. So it was a very cashy lineup. Now, as we're going to get into, scored 250 points. It was very chalky, didn't spend all the salary, but let's kind of just dissect the lineup from a few different angles. First off, stacking. There was no primary stack, so there was no QB plus 1, QB plus 2. Like I said, should have been, would have scored more points. But nonetheless, this lineup got there. So that's all that really matters. And it did have good secondary stacks. So at least there were stacks. At least it was correlated in other areas. So we had Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid. Khalil Shakir, I felt like, was a sharp play. He was popping a little bit. I know, some of the DFS Army was on him as a pivot. Diggs was low owned too, but Diggs was probably going to draw some Sauce Gardner. So play some Khalil Shakir in this spot, and he smashed at his salary. And Dalton Kincaid was a good play. So these two, together, a little secondary stack, and then really the secondary stack that brought it home was Devin Singletary, Tank Dell. I did have this in a lot of my builds, but this stack right here is really chalky, as you're going to see. So for the Millie Maker, you wouldn't have expect to have seen, a stack like this take it down without, being really contrarian in a lot of other spots. But it wasn't. So Devin Singletary, 41%, Ryan Robinson, 28%. We had Tank Dell, 34%, DJ Moore, 24%, Tyreek Hill, 17%. So overall, very chalky lineup. Couple guys right around 10%, and then just Khalil Shakir really is the top leverage play at 1%. 180%. I think that's probably the highest on the season. Now that I'm looking at it, we've had 102, 113, 145, 107, 126, 167, 104, 132, 80, and 118. So yeah, that is the highest on the season. And, value, there wasn't obviously going to be, a ton of smashing value because the lineup didn't score that many points, only 215 points, so only 4.32x. However, I will say, even in the lower scoring weeks, you almost always see at least one lineup hit 6 to 7x the salary. That's what this lineup did with Khalil Shakir at 7.34x. So great week. And oh, by the way, I want to point something out. And I went ahead and pulled this up on DFS Army's Twitter, X, whatever the kids are calling it nowadays. But some guy, we're actually going to see his lineup here in a second. Don't tase me, bro. But his username on X is the Big Empty. And he shouted out to Geek, the founder of DFS Army, use the optimizer to cash $40,000 tonight. Thank you. He was actually, as we're going to see, he was a fraction of a point out of winning the Millie. So we're going to look at kind of what he did. And then let's look at some mass multi-entry strategies. So yeah, you see he had a 205 as well. He did stack. So he had Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, no bring back. Also had a couple. So he had QB +1. He also had Trey McBride, Rondale Moore, Tank Dell, and Devin Singletary. I shit you guys not. When I was running optimals like on Thursday, like these were a lot of the builds that I was getting. And, it was heavy on the game stack, and you could get Trevor Lawrence, or it was like Kyler Murray, or, it was like CJ Stroud. So Trevor Lawrence was the guy that was popping the most in optimals, and it was clearly right. So shout out to Don't Taste Me, bro. DFS Army subscriber almost took down the Millie. So close. But let's go ahead and want to look at some mass multi-entry strategy of DFS pros. I do have one that's really, did well and won some money, and everyone knows who he is. So looking to get right into that one. And by the way, I said I was going to do this show earlier than Monday night, and I did. I recorded it actually this morning, and then the audio cut out halfway. So I apologize for the lateness. Nonetheless, though, if you enjoy this kind of content, please hit that like button. Let us know. Let us know how the Millie Maker went for you this past week. I tell you, it didn't go well for me because I'm typically going to fade the chalk, and it was a chalk smash week. Brock Purdy. So the Fantasy Bros, his top lineup, he had a Purdy, Gibbs, Pollard, Hopkins, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, Conklin, Ayuk, and New York Giants. So obviously the Purdy to the Ayuk stack worked out for him. Also, he had Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins. So a little ping pong stack there. Also had Gibbs and Pollard. And so his lineups, he had a lot of QB +1, tons of Purdy. So we got Purdy and Ayuk, and I think as we're going to see, what probably killed it for him was a lot of his running backs. Now, the top lineups, it can kind of be deceiving, right? Because you look at the top ones. But let's go down here and see, how some of these other ones did. So did pretty well on the backs there. Jamar Gibbs, Brian Robinson, Henderson, 12 points. That's not going to be enough to even sniff the top of the Millie. So, some of these backs that he played certainly kind of messed him up. But yeah, being so heavily on Purdy certainly made it pretty good day. Minus 950 for mass multi-entry in the Millie Maker. That's pretty good because it's pretty easy, even if you know what you're doing, to lose 2,000, 2,500 in that contest. So, and I think the reason why I had such a decent day obviously was Purdy, 43% exposure. You got the nuts QB or, the 1A, 1B QB, whatever, as far as the nuts goes, with him and Lawrence, and 43%. So that's a lot of exposure. And then got Justin Fields, and then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 other quarterbacks. But, the key point here was way over on Purdy and Fields, and then just kind of let it ride, it looks like, with the other quarterbacks. Now, what I really think hurt this lineup, and just kind of hurt all of his lineups, just all of his exposures, was Darrell Henderson and Devin Achane. So 44%, 42%, not nearly. That's just way too much. And yeah, faded Robinson under the field on Singletary. So, if he stacks Purdy with, these two backs and is heavy on those two backs versus these two backs, we're talking a huge difference probably. Nailed Ayuk. So really saved the day. Ayuk, DJ Moore. These were guys that certainly saved the day. Quentin Johnson pretty much screwed him. A little over on Calvin Ridley, so that certainly helps, getting some exposure there. Not a lot of cup exposure, so that's good. But under on Tyreek Hill, under on Amon-Ra, and under on Tank Dell. So, had the right stack, which totally made up for, just pretty much bombing a lot of the other plays. And then, it was over on McBride and Conklin. So, just clearly identified a few spots where he kind of wanted to be all in and then went from there. So now we're going to look at Utica. Now, he won the Millie Maker a couple weeks ago. And as you can see here, at minus 1980 on this slate. So that's kind of how this goes for most people, even the best of the best. The payout structure is awful in the Millie Maker. So it is really hard to mass multi-enter this contest and have a profit. You're trying to win the thing. At least if you can win it once, it could make your whole DFS career. So Brock Purdy and Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. So, you had the top QB and his pass catcher, but really what hurt this was Deebo Samuel. You wanted Kittle, right? And then, obviously top two backs. Those were core plays for us at DFS Army, Brian Robinson and Devin Singletary. So, we love those guys. And so did the field, though. So 28%, 41%. But, it's good to be right on certain players, obviously. And, when you identify them as core, sometimes you want to go all in. Which just like overall general strategy, there's two ways to play it, right? If you think a guy is going to be 41% owned in the Millie Maker, you have to think of it two ways. I'm either going to be over the field on this player, or, I'm going to maybe consider fading this player, essentially. So it's plus EV. Like, here's what the field's going to be. I'm going to eat this chalk. I'm going to be over the field. Or I think that's bad chalk. Or maybe he'll get hurt in the first quarter and 41% of the field will be dead. I'm going to fade that player. So both ways work. It's just a matter of variance and playing the game long enough to see it come to fruition. So Ayuk obviously was the top guy here, and not a whole lot else besides that to write home about. Purdy, Ayuk, and the two running backs. Now this lineup had Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, and DeAndre Hopkins bring back. Had Pollard, had Singletary. Pollard did not get there, even though he had a decent day. And then Ronald Moore, he started off with a touchdown, and it looked like he was on his way to a smash at 3,300, and then that was pretty much it. So Schultz and McCaffrey. So this lineup was the Lawrence lineup, and even in obviously the non-Purdy lineup still found a way to get some San Francisco players. So he had QB +1 and QB +2. Here you see Calvin Ridley and Evan Ingram. And then, one thing to point out, he did have a lot more contrarian builds. So 112, 110%, 112%. And this is kind of what I was saying. I didn't have a good week in the Millie Maker because I'm going to play more like this. I'm going to play, more contrarian bills. I'm not going to eat a bunch of chalk. And when the chalk hits, you just know you're going to lose that week. That's just how it goes. So let's take a look at Utical's exposures. So CJ Stroud, 16%. I loved Stroud. I loved Purdy and Lawrence. So these are a lot of the exposures that I had. Didn't really have Geno Smith, but 4 guys above 10%, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 quarterbacks. Now, pretty much locked in Pollard, 98%. I had thought it was a good spot too once CeeDee Lamb said that he was going to, the Cowboys were going to get Pollard more involved, but he just didn't get there. I don't know. The volume is just not quite there for him, but at least it wasn't a terrible day. So Brian Robinson, like I said, this is kind of what I was just talking about. Going to be 20%, 28%. Okay. Well, I'm going to be 43%. So there's that positive leverage. Austin Eckler, something's not right with him. I guess there was a play where, he could have, there was like a wide open lane and he ended up having a 37-yard run, but Eckler 2 years ago might have taken that to the house. Just really sad to see because I had quite a bit of Eckler as well. And then, under on Singletary. So that was the move for Utical where he basically said, I'm going to fade that player. I'm going to be over on Brian Robinson. I'm going to be under on Singletary. And, didn't work out, but totally see his strategy there. Same thing with Cooper Kupp. He looked like he was going to smash early in that game. Like he caught a pass and then Stafford basically, he threw a terrible ball. Kupp was wide open in the end zone. He just threw a terrible ball. I couldn't adjust to it right. And he dropped it. And, it was like a 40-yard, it would have been like a 40-yard touchdown. He was the last leg of a parlay for me. Just crushed it. So annoying. But, and then he got hurt. So also had a good amount of him at DFS, not this much, but this is obviously the 1980 minus 1980, kind of speaks for itself in that situation. Because with the exception of Ridley, didn't really smash with any of the wide receiver plays. And kind of the same thing at tight end. None of these guys broke the slate. Trey McBride, 34%. So, that was too much for sure on this slate. And, no defense exposure was too high. So last guy we're going to look at for a mass multi-entry strategy. And then I want to look at just a couple other slates as far as like the afternoon slate. And then, we'll look at the main slate, like a smaller field stuff real quick. And then we'll finish this up. So specifically the afternoon slate, the reason why I want to take a look at that one is we're coming up right on the Thanksgiving slate. So that's going to be a 3-gamer. So there's definitely some things to learn. By the way, we got a lot of content coming your way this week. It already started today with the first look, Geek's first look for the Thanksgiving slate. So stay tuned. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Hit that notification button because it's going to be rapid fire comment coming at you. And comment, let me know if you're playing the slate and who you like coming up for these games. So Kyler Murray is the quarterback here in his top lineup, which was Murray and Rondale Moore, Trey McBride, Tank Dell, Devin Singletary. So that's one thing about Osimo. And, it's good to see him in the money plus $500 because he's not afraid to overstack games. And you see it here, QB +2, +2 on the other side. And then Saquon Barkley, I thought this was a really sharp play. And I'm kind of mad at myself for not playing more Saquon Barkley because I remember looking at this slate and I was just like, well, Barkley's 2% projected ownership. Washington's I get that New York is bad, but Washington's not good either. Their defense is terrible. Like, what if Barkley has a pretty good game? Well, he smashed 30 friggin' points, but only 2% of the field played him. So that's why he wasn't in the nuts. Just crazy. Play studs at low ownership, especially when their price comes down. So Calvin Ridley as well and Christian McCaffrey. So wow, this lineup was able to get Barkley and Christian McCaffrey in the same lineup, and Calvin Ridley. The three of them, at 60, 80 plus points. So Osimo, he's the type of player, he gets a good combination of QB +1, QB +2, and QB +3. So here you see some QB +3. This also has another secondary stack of Tyreek Hill and Miami defense. CJ Stroud +3 with one of them being Singletary. Yeah, he's not afraid to stack the running back either. Purdy, Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey. QB +2. QB +3 plus the defense. Actually not seeing any QB +1. I might have misread that earlier. Yeah, it looks like all QB +2 and QB +3. Okay, there it is. CJ Stroud and Tank Dell. So that one was QB +1. So his optimizer clearly builds for QB +1, QB +2, and QB +3. By the way, we have those stacking features at DFS Army as well. So, by the way, if you guys want to try it out, use the free offer in the video. There's several different sites that you can sign up to, which is pretty awesome. It gives you several options and you get a free month of DFS Army. So definitely check the video description and try it out. So as far as his QB exposures, Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, Brock Purdy, those are the top three. And then a little bit of CJ Stroud. So, pretty much all the same guys we were on this week with DFS Army and in the cheat sheets. He got pretty close. I think his top lineup placed 31st. So it was pretty dang close. Now, kind of the same thing I was talking about earlier, right? A guy's 41% owned. Are you going to fade that? Or are you going to be way over the field? Osimo decided in this spot he was going to be way over the field. He was quite a bit over the field on Christian McCaffrey, but he also didn't pay up at quarterback. So much easier to do. 18% Barkley. So he was way over the field on Barkley. So he really was on with these plays. But did fade Brian Robinson. So who knows? Maybe he would have hit that perfect combo to get there if he would have had a little bit more Brian Robinson. So, and this is, I think it's just like a general lesson for DFS. Like you can nail so many things right. And when you're playing mass multi-entry, like you can still lose or, barely win $500, which almost feels like a loss sometimes because you nailed so many things, right? You got all the quarterbacks right. You got almost all the running backs, but you missed one. You got 50% Tyreek Hill, let's see, 40% Tank Dell. So you were over the field there. Let's see where it was on Calvin Ridley. But yeah, under the field on Calvin Ridley. So, you didn't see the Calvin Ridley smash game coming. It kind of burned you, right? So, yeah, Hill, Dell, those really stand out. Marquise Brown, Rondale Moore, Kirk and Cup were his other high exposure guys. So, just needed a little bit less Kirk and a little bit more Calvin Ridley and might have hit the nuts as well. And then Ingram and McBride. So quite a bit over, way over on Ingram, quite a bit over on McBride as well. And then D, Miami and Green Bay were the two highest exposures. And, obviously very sharp. Goes without saying, Osimo. Didn't get crazy on any defense exposures because we know how nuts that is. So I want to look at this one. Hopefully it'll load. I like this one because it's 5,300 entries, much more winnable. $33, not cheap, but also, if you're putting $20 into Millie Maker, if you're watching this, which I'm sure you if you're watching this, oh, I think this was our boy actually. This was a DFS Army takedown. Slick Willie. I'll show you guys something. That's a boy right there. 20,000, Slick Willie 77, DFS Army VIP. I just saw this today. Freaking awesome. Had a Trevor Lawrence. Now he put 5 in here, so good for him. And this is kind of what I was saying. And for this, I didn't realize it actually. When I first clicked on this was the contest that he won. I know Slick Willie had a takedown, but this is like exactly what I was saying. These contests are much more winnable. He put 5 entries in here, right? $33. So, over $100, but not crazy. And it's 5,300. So you have a much more better chance of winning a contest like this. So he had Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, and Evan Ingram. So nailed the Lawrence to Ridley stacked. And this was coming up in the optimal. This is coming up in DFS Army optimals. By the way, you can get this too. So you can get access to the domination station, the cheat sheet, all DFS Army tools. Use code FantasyFling for 10% off at VIP subscription. So, these were a lot of our core plays. Brian Robinson, Devin Singletary, Tyreek Hill was a core play for me. Tank Dell as well. And Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley kept coming up in optimal. So you plug in your core plays, you put them into the optimizer, and then you get a Trevor Lawrence plus Calvin Ridley stack. Boom. 199 points. You win $20,000. So congrats to Slick Willie. Awesome stuff. Last thing we are going to do, I want to look at the afternoon slate because this is exactly what we are going to be playing on Thursday. We are going to be playing these 3-game slates. So let's look at the $15 one because I know most people aren't playing the $333 slate. So one thing that stands out with some of these, as you'll see, a couple rules for playing 3-game slates. You have to play different than you would on a main slate. So there's only so many player combinations on a 3-game. So you have to be willing to allow for 2 running backs on the same game. You have to be willing to allow a little bit of, 1 to 2, like going against your defense, players going against the defense. Double tight end is in play. Like I just let the flex ride on a slate like this. So you will see the top lineup, 186 points, obviously, and it's going to be chalky. So it's going to be a lot chalkier. So you kind of have to retrain your brain for things you do for the main slate. Yeah, you want a guy that is going to be 15% or 19%, a couple 19% guys that'll get you unique because that is pretty low owned for a 3 game slate. So this one had Brock Purdy, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. Stacking is going to happen more naturally as well because there obviously is only a few games. So there's only so many player combinations. Now, for example, Breece Hall going against Bills defense. That's normally not something you would do, right? Not negatively correlated on a main slate. Well, on a 3-game slate, you kind of have to ignore that. So you also have to be willing to play more kind of turds. Jarrell Henderson, you're not playing him really on a main slate, but 5,000, he gets you 12 points on a 3-game slate. Yeah, that'll certainly do. And I mean, come on, Khalil Shakir, 3,200, enough to win the Millie Maker, enough to win the afternoon slate as well. So that was first place. Let's see what second place did. Just behind. Very similar lineup. In fact, yeah, these guys tied. So, and so to third place, and this lineup looked like it was unique. So this one had Brock Purdy, had James Cook versus Brees Hall. So, yeah, Henderson, Brock Purdy, and Ayuk and George Kittle. So that was the stack. The nut stack on this slate for sure. Terrell Henderson, James Cook, Khalil Shakir. So also had James Cook, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, and Buffalo D. So, ended up winning 10K as well. So really good stuff. But I think that will wrap this slate up. Hopefully the audio didn't cut out halfway on this one. But thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, we got so much content coming your way. So stay tuned. And I will see you next week for another weekend review.